Shalom, shalom, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us wherever you are in the world today for us to be able to explore important issues, important moral issues, and continue to engage as Jews with them. It's a delight to be here today with Abby Leibman, who is the president and CEO of MAZON, a Jewish response to hunger. She's been there since 2011, so about 14 years. And she comes with just decades of experience in the nonprofit sector as a lawyer and as a policy advocate, and someone I've intersected with in the Jewish social justice space
Yeah.
over the years, and appreciate her voice and leadership very much. So, Abby, thank you for being here to talk.
Thank you for having me, Shmuly. It's a pleasure.
So, for those who don't know, Mazon is a Jewish organization working for people of all faiths and all backgrounds um, to respond to hunger. Let me ask you, how do Jewish values guide the way decisions are made in the organizations, both strategic and everyday, in how Mazon does its work?
I think the starting point for everything we do is our Jewish values. So the mission itself is an expression of what we see as fundamental Jewish values, right? The idea that we are committed as a people to respond where there is a need, where there is vulnerability, and that our obligations in the world are about not judging others and certainly not limiting that response either. It is, we are all created B'Tselem Elohim, right, in the image of God. And so we are all subject to both the needs and the opportunities, but also the commitments that we have for each other. And so for us, the entire organization's raison d'etre is about exemplifying, living those values, and implementing them wherever we can. In terms of day-to-day decisions, this is what we think guides all of what we do. We are both in how we treat each other here, in what we hope and expect of the policymakers that we interact with the colleague organizations that we want to partner with and lift up and educate and collaborate with. So all of that is a part of this idea that we are here together to do that which we can to respond to that kind of vulnerability that exists in our country.
Yeah. And post October 7th,
Mm.
has that shifted your work at all in terms of who you work with or who you serve or any dynamics of what Mazone looks like over the last 2 years?
I think, like any Jewish organization, we experience a sense of both the pain of what happened that day and the pain of the aftermath of that. And because Mazon does work to end hunger in both the United States and Israel, this is very centered in our work. We've always worked within the Green Line only. And we have colleagues in Israel and we worry for them and we are concerned about them. But in addition to our staff there, we work with a number of organizations there that also present their work in the same way we do, which is that regardless of a person's background or circumstances, that we are working to end hunger for all people. And in the context in Israel, that means it's more fraught and a little more complicated now. But it doesn't mean we will shy away from that which we see as the vital part of our mission, which is that no person deserves to go hungry, and that our faith demands that we respond to hunger where we see it, and regardless of the cause of that hunger.
Yeah, yeah, very well said. So we're in moments of what some might call political chaos in America, cultural chaos.
I think so.
Yeah, and many are questioning how we can create change today on systemic levels. What do you see as the most important policy levers right now for reducing food insecurity in the US? And are there policies that are underappreciated or underutilized? What are the opportunities? And where is there real frustration where there's not possibility?
So I don't think there's any, novel approach for any of this. And um, I, to make change in America requires the American people to engage in that change, whether it's through true grassroots organizing work or it's more grass tops organizing work, which we do a lot more of, or it's the direct advocacy that we do. And every one of those levers is vitally important still. And every one of them can be used in either local government, state governments, or the federal government. And when we talk about the chaotic nature of what's happening in our country, we're mostly talking about what's happening at the federal government level. And so I'm going to hold that for a second and think about in some of these other contexts where we've actually seen success and we've been able to do some things that our vision includes, which is seeing states as a good laboratory for doing more for people who are struggling rather than less. And in Arkansas, we've worked with advocates there to secure school meal funding for all students, which brought about another 49,000 students being able to get fed every day. And that's a fairly Republican dominated state. But there you also find colleagues to work with and find a level of understanding that says we can prioritize this. And we pioneered a lot of this work in the state of Minnesota, and where we had mixed political environment, which is now has a Democratic governor, but that doesn't mean that it isn't also still a struggle there. There's always about priorities and choices, and that's really what you see at both the local and state level is a struggle around priorities and the choices you have to make. The federal level has certainly made that other work much more complicated now, because it's shifted a financial burden onto states with regard to the flagship anti-hunger program in America, which is the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP. And those cost shifts will cost literally hundreds of millions of dollars a year for many states. And so helping them navigate through that is the big challenge in front of us. At the federal level, we will never give up. And I do not believe, I really cannot believe that those members of the House and the Senate who have long stood up for the SNAP program, who have long embraced the idea that there is an important role for the federal government in ending hunger in America, will suddenly turn their back on that, as we seems to be the case right now. So we believe that if we can move things in a way that's more specific, more incremental, more targeted, that we may be able to get bipartisan support for that. So we will not stop. And I'm reminded of the idea that sometimes being effective on defense is an important policy move on the part of any advocate. And that that is a part of not just defending what you have, but showing that there is an opposition to an authoritarian power grab around these issues in particular. And so we are conscious of being able to say, no, there is a righteous movement here that continues to push for justice for people who struggle with hunger, and we will not stop, and you will not stop hearing from us.
Yeah, amazing. Well, I'm so glad because we are in the streets in our own ways with our buses and our
I know.
shower and our pantry, and we rely so much around upon partners and upon certain assistance.
Mhm.
And I see in my own work how desperate many people are, and in ways that feel very new. I mean, the desperation's always been there, but new levels for new
Yeah.
people. So, I wasn't planning to talk about this, but,
Hmm.
you know, going back to Israel and Gaza for a moment, I
Mm.
mean, by far, in my lifetime, I've never seen Americans or the world really as concerned about issues of hunger as they were over the recent months. And on the one hand, it feels like hunger in Gaza is real, and all people of compassion feel compassion for people in a famine and starving. On the other
Mm.
hand, we also know the complexities where there's lots of deception. Hamas steals aid. I mean, just a few days ago, an aid worker bringing in aid killed Israelis in the process. And so I wonder, like, how being in the hunger business has the whole global discourse and national discourse around hunger in Gaza um, helped or hindered the work on hunger you're trying to do, and like how has that just kind of impacted the field?
Um, so first, I would say that the Budget Reconciliation Act that was pushed through this Congress did more to educate people on the fact that there is this program that the federal government has run for almost 100 years that helps to feed literally tens of millions of Americans. Um, and nobody has done more to allow people to actually understand what SNAP is, excuse me, than this Congress, which I don't think was their intent, actually. Um, so there's an awareness, I think, of the fact that there is hunger in America, which I believe people struggled with more in terms of a recognition than they do around global hunger issues. The idea that there is famine in Africa, that there are struggles of hunger in poor countries. That has always been a part of the American mindset. But the idea that it exists here has been less front of mind. And some of that's because we have these effective programs that have responded to the most dire of those needs. The same would be true in Israel. In Israel, it wasn't until former Prime Minister Sharon acknowledged that there was actually hunger in Israel that the Israeli leadership, as well as many of the people, would actually acknowledge that there is hunger there. And so the struggles around hunger, food insecurity in Israel are very real. The impact of watching a, a circumstance move to a place of dire need in a region we all watch very closely has also elevated the awareness that this happens and it can happen quickly. And I think that that is the the revealing thing. What we do about that, how we respond to it. So for us, some of that is very rooted in what our Jewish values are. But how does America respond to that? That is an issue that MAZON does not engage in. So our work is really about moving the leadership in Israel to be responsive to the hunger crises that they are a part of, as opposed to us pushing on international actors to do more around that. Um, since this is our job is here, is to invest in moving our federal leadership to not destroy benefits, but to restore them and strengthen them. Something that was happening in the previous administration, something that had seen remarkable changes and progress in the way we think and define things that are very wonky, but have a real impact. And now all of that is being undermined. And that's the focus of our work.
So if you were to look 5, 10 years out, what's your vision for what hunger in America and Israel might look like? Like what's realistic when we talk about ending hunger? What's realistic of what's possible in that time frame?
Well, as you well know, we have a virtual hunger museum. And it tells the story of hunger in America for over 100-year period, from basically the Gilded Age, which everyone's really familiar with now, thank you, pop culture, um, to roughly now, a couple of years ago. And what we see is that in this country, we did almost end hunger for all intents and purposes, which means that you have more people coming off of the need to rely on benefits than are coming on. that you see greatly diminished need. So the need moved down to about 3% of the American populace. And that was probably in the 1960s, 70s. And then we dismantled that by a lot of different factors that came into play in the changes made in the federal government's approach to government, basically. And there's no true end to hunger, meaning there'll be zero. There's no such thing because you will always have people that are frail in some way, remain vulnerable in some way, people that age into poverty. And there is no going back to work. Although the current work requirements we have in this country mean that if you're an aged person, you are have to go back to work in order to get fed. Um, there's there's no such thing as zero. There's only a response that keeps people from struggling and a set of systems and supports and opportunities in this country that ensure that the majority of people do not have to go into this system.
Yeah, yeah, thank you. I appreciate that historical context. So last question. What keeps you hopeful in all this? There's so many concerns, there's so much to despair about, there's so many tensions.
Hmm.
What sustains you? What inspires you? What keeps you hopeful, to keep doing this work?
Um, it's impossible to be an advocate and not be an optimist. You just can't do it. Um, the thing that gives me hope is the American people. Sorry, it also makes me a little emotional, but time and again for us, we have seen people step up and be moved to approach their policymakers, the leaders in this country, and say, this is what we want. We do not want what you are doing. And people who turn out and say we will be heard, we want to be heard. Mazon has all kinds of opportunities for people to do that with us, or to lift it up so they can do it in their communities. But it is the American people, because I know the American people, the vast majority of the American people, they do not want to see people suffer and struggle with hunger. They don't. They
Yeah,
want to see their government, their tax dollars going to support, I'm going to sneeze, going to support the the true nature of what it means to be a community, a country that sees itself as a community, supporting each other in times of crisis and need. And that's what gives me hope that
wonderful.
that will prevail in the end.
Friends, be sure to consider supporting Mazone and follow them on social media. Abby, thanks for all your great work.
Thank you for having me, Rabbi. I really appreciate it. Shana Tova.